Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of Coco and the Sun podcast. I am your host, Malika Critchlow. Very happy to be here today, enjoying the weather in Miami. It has been a bit rainy, but enjoying the rain and so grateful for it because it was hot last week. Anyways, so today we're going to continue with the book, The Magdalene Manuscript and Judi Sion's story. And I don't know. Today is the Aquarius full moon. It's supposed to be a super moon and a blue moon. So they said we're not going to get one like this until 2032. And I don't know what it's going to be for me. I don't know what it's going to mean for me. Lots of dreams last night, very fast moving images. So I'm not sure what it all means yet fully, but yeah, it feels like more of an understanding of what I'm supposed to do. So I don't know though. We'll see how it all plays out. I do know it feels good. Feels good. It feels good so far. So I'm waiting to see how it all, yeah, plays out in this reality. So anyways, I hope all of you are well. What has it been for you? Is it just a regular moon? It don't make a difference. Or are you feeling different or seeing new things for you? m- the moon didn't really used to make a difference to me prior to maybe a year and a half ago. But then I think like I've started getting more sensitive to my feelings and my dreams, my thoughts. And so now I do see differences with moons and how I feel in my emotions, my dreams. Yeah, I think this one is really showing the way to the possible way forward and more clear understanding of the unfolding of self. So, anyways, don't have anything else. I don't have much insights today. So let's start reading. Okay, so in the last part we read, she had found the church at Renee Le Chateau with her daughters. Um, and she she wanted to know more about Magdalene and her tantric relationship, but yeah, sure. Let me put on my glasses. Okay. Despite the heights I scaled in Europe, despite my visions and visitations here, home ultimately demanded our presence. Mm. Life refused to be avoided, and we returned deeply touched, but only momentarily distracted from my losses. I suppose relationship is really not my life's work, I told myself. Perhaps I should pass the torch I carry for this work to someone who can bring it home. Obviously, I can't do it. I made peace with all my childhood advisors, said goodbye to all my dreams, and one night when Tom and Pam and I were driving through Hoppyland, I realized what I had to do. The love between them was the deepest and purest love I had ever seen between two people. I was thrilled to be close to it, absolutely thrilled that the closer I got, the more obvious the love was. It was real. It wasn't put on for show. They had loved each other from first sight. The exquisite depth of it had not lessened through the years and the experience of each other's flaws. They still held each other in the highest esteem on all levels, spiritually and emotionally. Maybe I'm not the one who's supposed to do this work in a relationship, I gushed out from the backseat, gesturing blindly in the dark, nothing if not dramatic. I'm trying to see clearly in these glasses. I've never seen two people love each other the way you do. It would be my honor to pass the relationship torch to you. Now I can relax and stop searching. I will never have another relationship. I pass the torch to you. I don't know if either of them understood the path within me from which my words came, but I leaned forward from the back seat and announced just that. I told them that I had never seen two people love each other as they loved each other. And I babbled on that I had always been told that I came to work on balancing the male-female energy on the plane through living with my mate and through the day-to-day living, loving of each other in full and total harmony and evenness and truth. And then I thrust my hand forward as if passing a torch. And summarily announced that I was out of the relationship business and that the job was henceforth theirs. Then I sat back and was quiet to emphasize my point. By this time, however, I had spent 2 years desiring to die, and I usually get what I want in the long run. I've just noticed that I usually get what I want after I don't want it anymore. And so it was inevitable, I suppose, that the discomfort from certain physical symptoms would overtake the attention I was paying to my depression. Walking had become painful. My joints ached. I felt terrible. My strength seemed to have run out, along with my will. I had no energy, and I couldn't sleep at night, tossing and turning, haunted by all the ghosts of my past. I contacted Metatron, the archangel, through a remarkable and most genuine woman in Utah, who was also a medical intuitive. I had several readings, and they, along with the information I had gotten from the Hathors through Tom, had been my only source of comfort and healing through those years. Metatron had sharp words for me on this occasion, though. He told me I was in the early stages of lupus and that if I didn't work immediately to counteract it, I would get my death wish. He then gave me a formula of antioxidants to take. I immediately called Tom and asked to speak to the Hathors. I needed corroboration on a different opinion. When they came in, I announced my unfaithfulness and told them that I had been seeing someone else. They howled with laughter, and then, without me telling them anything I had already been told, they launched into what was wrong with me and what could be done to heal it if I chose to live. Then they gave me the sounds that I needed to release and heal. It was recorded, and I took those sounds home and played them over and over and over. I credit Tom's Hathor sounds along with the regimen of antioxidants with healing me. Now, I must tell you that though I had my personal healing experience with sound, I had not experienced Tom Kenyon as the teacher. Needless to say, I had issues with teachers, and I had observed his impeccability as a human for a long, long time before I decided I would take a chance and see what he taught. But by now, the impact of sound in my life was significant, and when there was a local workshop, it only made sense for me to step in and help with registration and other facilitation needs as a feeble attempt at thank you. By the end of the first day, I had discovered that my friend Tom not only had one of the most remarkable voices in the world, but was also the most erudite single human being I had ever experienced on a vast peer view of subjects. He understands the nuances and the intention behind the major streams of internal alchemy, including Tibetan, Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism, Egyptian high alchemy, and esoteric Christianity. And whatever his subject, he taught with humor and humility, making the material both comprehensible and conscious altering simultaneously. He had distilled the essence of how each stream raises consciousness. He literally understood the intention behind what was held as sacred within each pathway. He understood the mystery without having to wrap the tendrils of dogma around it. He had gleaned the kernels of these streams of internal alchemy and taught both the science and the physics of consciousness carefully and gently with no dogma attached. By the end of the first weekend, Tom Kenyon had earned my respect in a category where I never thought I'd respect another human being as a teacher. I was different, literally and profoundly altered from both the information and the sound. I knew how he lived his life. I had been around the house enough to see the impeccability with which he attended his daily functions. I knew his honor. I saw how much he loved his wife and how he served the feminine, how the mother was honored in his walk. Now, I had experienced the master teacher, and I wanted to help him present his work to the world in the way it deserved to be presented. As I researched his life, I discovered he was one of the pioneers of helping science accept the reality that sound and frequency can and do shift brain states, having formed acoustic brain research to research the effects of sound on consciousness in 1983. Sorry. He spent a decade doing the research that ultimately proved just how successfully sound could alter and affect brain states. How this translated to a workshop was actually quite obvious and utterly brilliant. The left brain got the hard information it needed from the psychotherapist scientist Tom, and the right brain got what it needed during the sound meditations from the mystical Tom. Unspoken material was transmitted through sound codes that came through his voice during these frequent sound meditations. The combination of both teaching in words and toning in sounds was remarkable to experience. My intuition told me this work was going to be crucial in the next decades on planet Earth. We began to dialogue about how I could help Tom put his work into the world. My years in communication and writing could be used on something that made a difference again. But when their beautiful waterfront rental house went on the market for sale, but then their beautiful rental waterfront house went on the market for sale. And since they had to move, they decided to move to the Southwest. I couldn't face any more losses in my life. We were all so close. I realized it was perhaps time for a change in my life as well, and I made plans to join them. The three musketeers couldn't be separated by anything so mundane as losing a rental house. And friends like we had become don't come along often in a lifetime. I had a garage sale and sold my favorite things and went east to handle some old business there. My mother's care had gotten beyond my capability, and I had finally placed her in a home. My daughters were both in college. I could move anywhere. Pam had fought breast cancer a few years before, but she had successfully beaten it. She had chosen to live. I had work to do now that felt important and no longer spent all day wanting to die. I too had chosen to live, and so life began to feel like springtime. There were many places within Tom's work where my business background was sorely needed. I was going to help facilitate for him, and I was heavily involved in raising funds to build a new sound healing temple the Hathors had requested in New Mexico. There was much work to do, and I genuinely felt that getting Tom's work into the world was the most important thing I could do with my talent. His work is sound, and sound and music cut across all boundaries. Sound transcends language, and he was real. He was no hypocrite. And he loved and honored the feminine, the mother. He loved and adored his wife, and that was what really mattered to me after a lifetime of men who either abused or ignored the feminine. And besides, we were all best friends. We all had great times together. We moved through the kitchen with ease. We traveled together. We laughed and watched bad television together. Pam and I had cried over mistakes we'd made with our children. We'd looked at our childhood photo albums and sobbed that we hadn't known how beautiful we were. We cried together that we had spent a lifetime thinking we were fat and ugly. I looked at her childhood photos and saw one of the truly most beautiful women I had ever seen. She swore the same was true for me. We held each other and told each other our most intimate secrets. We had given a girl up. She had given a girl up she had given a girl up for adoption at birth. I had given a girl up for adoption at birth. But Pam's shoulder had begun to hurt her, and then she went to the doctor on the island before we left, and they told her it was a torn rotator cuff, probably from her previous surgery. They said it would take a long time to heal, and there was nothing she could do. So she did nothing, but it was getting worse. And then just before Christmas, Tom called me on the East Coast where I was cleaning up old business. Pam's pain had gotten so bad they had taken her to the emergency room. The emergency room had done bone scans, which hadn't been done on the island, and they showed that the cancer had gotten to the bones. Tom was told that Pam was in stage 4 cancer. Allopathic medicine offered her nothing, only a death certificate. It was jarring news, but Pam swore she could beat it. Before I could join them, they began the process of moving back. Pam wanted to come closer home. Then they called and asked me if I would accompany Pam to Mexico to a special clinic where there was hope through a new treatment. Tom had taken care of her alone for the last several years since the initial diagnosis, and expenses were mounting, and he needed to stay behind and work to pay the bills. It would mean being gone a month, and Adrienne had just gotten home for the summer and wanted me with her. But I had made a promise a few years before on a beach in Greece in the middle of the night, and I knew I had to go. And so it was that Pam and I spent a month in Tijuana in a clinic that used insulin comas to suspend the body in a state of death, allowing for maximum penetration of oxygen, which ostensibly could kill cancer cells. This process was highly experimental and was not possible in North America, not with the monopoly on death that the American Medical Association has. In that month, I watched the most remarkable, desperate, and genuine people come and go. I watched miracles occur and I watched people die. When Pam initially began the coma process, after weeks of preparation, the induction process caused a terrible struggle as she moved between the dimensions. This shifting of dimensions was as exhausting emotionally as it was physically. And after her first coma, Pam swore she would never do another one. The process of both induction and the return to consciousness was extremely altering. The sense of departure was so severe on induction that panic could easily occur. And when they injected the vitamin formula that brought her back, the body was subject to horrible sweats and spasms. The morning she was due to appear for her second coma, she refused to go. The comas were, everyone felt, her only hope. There was nothing left to try. She had been doing all the other possible protocols for weeks to build her system, but she was in stage 4 cancer. North America offered her no hope. This, at least, offered her hope. And as long as she had thought she could handle the process, she had believed she could heal. I didn't know what to do. I was alone in Tijuana, Mexico with my best friend, and the responsibility felt huge. And so that morning, I see the only thing I could think of. I offered to try to guide her through the dimensions during the induction process, to try to guide her into the coma and back out with my voice, to lay a trail she could follow when her consciousness left her body. And I promised her I would be there for her when she returned, singing her back. She liked the idea. I spoke with the clinic director as he had become a friend, and he approved. I had begun the process of rewriting their medical protocols, and for all practical purposes, I had essentially started working there. He supported whatever appeared to help a patient and offered the potential of making the process easier. I reasoned that whatever belief system the patient held should be honored, as the patient was essentially going through the death process with each coma over and over. So I could sing comfort to her, honoring the deities she held sacred, that might create a safe platform for her. So the next morning, I took along the shamanic tools I had brought with me. I had eagle and hawk feathers and a Tibetan rattle and other simple Tibetan instruments. I had stones that had been spoken to me and asked. I had stones that had spoken to me and asked to come. When I wheeled her in that morning, the doctors who had become my friends moved aside and let me join them. They used one side of the hospital bed and I used the other. We laid out our tools across the sheet from each other: syringe, tubes, stethoscope on one side, eagle, hawk, bells on the other. I was deeply touched by their respect. They took out syringes and the bottles of medicine that would induce the coma and the vials that would bring her back. I took out the tinctures and rattles that would lay the trail of sound. I hoped she would follow, just as I had seen Tom do many times. They injected the insulin. I kissed her goodbye and held her hand while the insulin sunk into her veins. As it traveled through her, her journey began. The process had caused her deep panic the first time, but as she slipped into the dimension, she encountered her own underworld and the monsters of her childhood. I called the archangels and sang her chants that represented the deities that she revered. She loved Tara, and so I sang her the Tara chant over and over until she slipped deeply into coma with a blissful smile on her face, unlike the first time when she had jerked and moaned so radically. I sat by her for the time she was gone, holding her hand as I had the first time. Then the doctors motioned to me and began the process of injecting the vial that would bring her back, having held her in the near-death state as long as the monitored vital signs showed she could handle. I picked up my feathers and instruments and called her back. I sang her the tower chant again and other chants I knew. Her return was peaceful and she came back smiling without the jerking and panic. I was ecstatic. She came back with the remembrances that would eventually help her heal many unresolved issues that had haunted her. These were early childhood abuses she had hidden from her worldly view, covered over with layers of acceptability. After all, there were people to please. These were the issues that were killing her, issues that could easily cause cancer, in my humble AMA approved opinion. This process continued every day then until we left. When we left, the CAT scan showed a remarkable reduction of about 60% of the bone cancer. But a 60% reduction meant 40% was left, and the clinic didn't want her to go, but Pam needed a rest, and so we went back home, which Tom had moved back to the northwest at her request while we had been gone. Once back, though, it became very apparent that she needed to take the process further, and I couldn't go to Mexico with her this time. The summer was almost gone, and Adrienne was about to return to college, and so plans were made for Pam's son to go with her instead. Expenses were mounting, and Tom had to work. She was unhappy in the Seattle area where Tom had initially moved them. And so while she was gone the second time, Tom moved all their belongings back where Pam wanted to be, back to the beautiful waterfront home they had left behind 1 year before, right back next door to me. I was rethinking my life. Adrienne was about to go back to college. I loved working at the clinic in Tijuana, and they really needed me there. Through my time there, I had discovered a strange gift. I am good with people in crisis. I loved the edge of life and death. No wonder I had been drawn to shamanism. I was really good at ushering people between the dimensions. Sorry, guys. I began a dialogue with the sorry. I began a dialogue with the clinic about working in Tijuana full time. I would be a North American shaman at a cancer clinic in Mexico. And as it was with small towns, so it is with small islands. Word went around the island that I might go to work in Mexico. And one morning, as I dreamed about how it might be to live in Mexico, Tom called. So I hear you might be going to Mexico. Well, I'm thinking about it, I said. So I guess that would mean you couldn't help me get my work into the world then. We had all been so busy taking care of Pam, I hadn't thought about what we set out to do a few years ago. I realized that with everything going on, Tom and I hadn't had any time for business conversation in almost a year. His work had been on hold, and the work I was going to do for him certainly hadn't materialized. I sat at my dining room table staring out at sea, and I realized that what this phone call really meant. He was really asking if I was going to leave them. He was asking how much I believed in his work, and he was asking how much I really wanted to be with them. And I remembered the promise I'd made to Palm on the beach in Greece. And I heard my mouth tell Tom I wasn't really serious about going to Mexico. That was all that was said. We made no more of it. I have never regretted that decision for 1 minute. Then we got a call from the clinic that Palm's hip had developed a hairline crack, leaving her unable to put any weight on it at all. She wanted to come home, though they pressed her to stay at the clinic where she could continue therapy. But Pam wanted to come back to the island where she could look at the water and the eagles, and where ferry boats ply the great deep waters of Puget Sound. Tom and I went to Seattle to pick her up. We hadn't seen her in a month, and I remember how shocked we were when she got off the plane. She couldn't walk, and she'd lost a lot of weight. An incoming ferry had hit the ferry dock at Orcas, and it was closed. There was no way on or off the island with a car. I located a private barge that could land without a ramp, and so we brought Pam home like MacArthur returning to the Philippines. The boat pulled in and lowered its head gently onto the shore, and we drove off. I could write 1,000 pages about the next few months, and I could never fully or adequately tell the story. You go through life and you think you know someone from little experiences, little intimacies here and there, a cup of coffee, a tear, and eventually you do know them, but not like we came to know each other in the next few months. I had known Pam Kenyon for 5 years then, and I thought I knew her. And I thought I knew the stuff of which Tom Kenyon was made. But the two people I thought I knew became my blood in the next few months. They both ran in my veins. I watched Tom give everything he had to help Pam stay alive. He served her day and night. He made her juices, and when juices made her sick, he made her greens. And when greens didn't taste good, he made her curried vegetables. And when they didn't taste right, he made her soup. He searched through magazines and medical books and bought anything he thought would help. The living room swelled with boxes of therapies and supplements. In the next few months, we exchanged intimacies few people ever get the privilege to experience. I learned how to bathe someone in a wheelchair. It took all of us to figure out how to dress her without putting any weight on her at all. We fell over each other, learning to roll and turn the sheet as Tom and I figured out ways to move her around in bed. We propped pillows for comfort and told jokes and laughed and cried and shared deep secrets. And she had breakthroughs I will not share here. She remembered her deepest and darkest demons, the ones that she had driven so far into her bones. I arrived at their house around 7 a.m. and I left around midnight those months. Tom handled the night shift alone, getting almost no sleep at all, for the nights were when she thrashed and relived her deeply painful childhood. He simply never slept, and I watched his color turn beige and then gray. We were convinced Pam would live, but I wasn't sure about him anymore. We hired several caregivers to give each of us a few breaks, and Pam's other closest friends came in when he had workshops to teach. One by one, everyone she loved got to have cherished time with her. Remarkable people on the island came and sang to her and gave her messages and checked her vitals and did her hair. A doctor friend made house calls. In retrospect, she lived with bone cancer for 2 years with no pain medication. Until the last weeks of her life, she took nothing. Tom held the pain off with sound and energy work, which he diligently delivered with love and humor. One morning, I went over early to find her sitting with the biggest smile I had ever seen. Pam was bright and cheery and hungry, something I hadn't seen in quite a while. She drank a whole can of liquid food and looked for more and asked for more. Many friends stopped by that morning, and she greeted each of them with that smile that lit up their dark corners. But there was something different this morning. There was a power about her, a self-affirmed, self-assured presence I hadn't seen in her before. She told us that what she wanted and how she wanted it. She didn't care what the people around her wanted this morning. She knew what she wanted. Thomas in California teaching and was due to return later that day. I couldn't wait until he saw this new powerful Pam. I bathed her and watched her hair, and we howled at the abject ridiculousness of it all. Her sitting in a wheelchair with me pouring water over her head, and me sitting on the edge of the bathtub wetter than she was. Jennifer, my daughter, stopped by to visit. I don't remember now what Jennifer wanted to do, but I disapproved and gave her my usual parent talk, recommended my vision for her future, which of course differed from hers. When Jennifer left, everyone seemed to disappear simultaneously. Pam's grown kids all went into town, and Pam and I were alone in the house. You have to let go of your girls, Judi. You have to let them make their own decisions, Pam said to me, cocking her head to one side and narrowing her eyes at me. Oh, I know, I said, but she depends on me being the mother. I'm supposed to disagree with her. I tried to laugh it off, but I noticed the air was different in the room. It had the wet appearance that I had seen in a room once before. The light transferred differently. It was moist and pregnant looking. Pam wasn't letting this go. Look, I'm serious. You have to let go. They have their own lives to lead. Let Jennifer go. Let Adrian go. Let them go. I thought I just cajole us through this. Well, look, who's talking? I giggled at her. Aren't you the one who hasn't let your 17-year-old son out of your sight for the last 2 weeks? Her eyes lay on me like clouds lifting and floating. That was yesterday. Today, I see things differently. The very air changed density. The light in the air was visible. You have to drop your agendas for your daughters. They have their own agendas. You have to allow them their agendas. She wasn't going to let this go. Everyone has an agenda. She looked out the window toward the sparkling water. Even my caregivers have agendas. They all want to be the one who helps me feel better, or the one who takes away the pain. All the healers want to be the one who heals me. There's nothing wrong with that agenda, but it's their agenda, not mine. We were at one of the major issues in Pam's life. She had lived her life fulfilling someone else's agenda most of the time. My caregivers even have agendas for what I see when I look outside the window, she laughed. Yesterday, she said, I was looking out the window staring at the water, and my caregiver said, Pam, what are you looking at? And I said, I'm looking at the sparkles in the water. And the caregiver said, Pam, what do you see when you look at the sparkles in the water? Do you see God? Pam shot a cheesy grin and curled her lip. And Pam had said, No, I don't see God. I see freedom. The silence cut the air like a knife. We were at some nexus point, somewhere to the left of the last star and closing in on forever. I knew what the next question had to be, but I didn't know if I had the courage to ask it. I don't think it had ever seriously occurred to any of us that Pam might die. She was healing. This was just a healing crisis. She only came home for her hip to mend enough to go back to the clinic and finish the treatments, and everything would be fine after that. But this conversation had taken on mystical proportions, sounding like last words, and I didn't want to think that. But if this was her last conversation and I didn't ask the question, how would I live with myself? Do I have an agenda for you? I bit my lip. You used to before you went to Albuquerque. What was my agenda for you? You wanted me to live. She smiled a crescent that lit the whole room. Pam is the only person I have ever met who could light up a room like that. My hand trembled as I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, and tears dropped out my eyes like corks bobbing on the surface. I want to dance with you on all the great beaches of the world. We will, she said. What? In my mind and in my heart? Yes, in your mind and in your heart. And what about after Albuquerque? I had just recently slipped down to Albuquerque under direction from the Hathors to sink the shaft for the tone healing temple we were building there. And it had been a deeply mystical experience in which I'd had to own my power to make it happen. Now you're willing to allow me my own agenda, she said with a broad smile. Look, she continued, it doesn't matter if I live 20 minutes or 20 years. It's the process that matters. I felt transported to some realm I had never known before. There was a palpable, luminous quality between the molecules around us. The air held moisture and refracted light differently than I'd ever seen before. It looked wet, and Pam was literally glowing. Give away your animals, Judi. Find a good home for Koala Bear. You have to be free to go. She closed her eyes. I asked her if she wanted to take a nap, and she said she did, but she was afraid she'd wake up choking on childhood memories. I promised I'd stay in the room with her, and she drifted to sleep. I sat down and began to write down the conversation. I made notes to remind the caregivers not to press their agendas on Pam in the future. Pam began to breathe strangely. I dropped the notebook and stood up by her. I put my hand on her arm. She seemed to inhale, but she wouldn't exhale. She just held her breath. Breathe, Pam, I said, and she exhaled. Watching her and coaching her breathing, I remembered a teaching Tom had done on the three gunas. He had used the breath as an example so we'd understand the role of each guna. Raja, I remember him saying, begins in action. Sattva is the sustainer, that point of continuing inhale, almost in between breaths, the place most of us live where we get too comfortable, where we want to stay, where we hold our breath. And then there's tamas, who ends in action, like breathing out and breathing in. No one wants to think about destruction, but without destruction, without letting the breath out, Tom had said, there is no room for creation. I was thinking about the three gunas, listening to Pam breathing. She looked absolutely radiant. Her skin was ablaze with incandescent beauty, and I had never seen her look so powerful, even in her sleep. Her breathing evened out, and then it began to slow and became shallow. I don't really know why I began to sing, but I sang the Tara chant, standing beside her, holding her arm. If this was what death looked like, it was powerful and mystical and deeply peaceful. And all I knew to do was to sing to her. And so I sang her song, Tara's chant, for what seemed like a long time, but was only a few minutes. Then I thought about Tom, and I wondered how to let him know wherever he was, somewhere in the air now in Seattle, that this might be the end. So I shifted to a chant that I hope would call his consciousness. But once that was done, I shifted back to the Tara chant. This was Pam's time, whatever was happening. I was singing her chant when she stopped breathing, exactly 20 minutes after she said it didn't matter if she lived 20 minutes or 20 years. Her process was complete. She was as free as the sparkles on the water. The rest of the day and night were a blur of the intruding assaults that land when death visits. Funeral directors, police, I wanted to scream about this mystical place I'd just been to with Pam. I wanted them to know how serene and peaceful and exquisite her death had been, about how powerful she was at the end. But everyone had something to do. Late that night, exhausted and hysterical, I finally went home to an empty house. I sat by the window and sobbed. That's about all I remember for the next few days. Sitting by the window in an empty house, sobbing. We had walked the long, exhausted road to the end of her life together, laughing and crying at the mysticism of death and the insulting unexpectedness of it all. Life, the process, so unvalued one day, had become so precious in the end. Power, there for the taking, had been taken, finally, but not soon enough to save her life. I felt Pam all around me. I felt her in me. I felt like I was Pam for days. People came from every direction. I didn't know what to do with myself. I had known what to do every other day for months. I got up early, went over to Tom and Pam's house and helped take care of Pam. I was lost and purposeless without her, and there seemed to be no place for me in this new life Tom had pulled into. No one needed me. One morning, as I sat looking out the window crying, Tom called. Hearing the tears, he asked me what was wrong, and I remember telling him, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what to do. I used to know what to do. I used to get up every morning and come over to your house, but I don't know what to do now. It blurted out without a breath, a continuous wall of exhaustion and abject frustration at the seeming hopelessness of it all. Yes, you do, he said matter-of-factly. You go back to doing what you were doing before Pam died. You helped me get the work out into the world. And then I remembered what I was doing before Pam got sick. There was something to live for, something that mattered. I think I'm going to stop there for now, and we will continue in the next podcast. Wow. Well, that was very powerful, Pam's death. You know, going through all the stages of letting go. It's not easy. So, I hope everybody has a good week. It's the beginning of the week. It's Monday. And, all that you want for yourself start showing up for you in the best way possible, as long as it doesn't harm anyone. I hope you know you are loved and you are loved and you're gentle with yourself in that love unfolding, that self-love, that self-understanding, that self-acceptance. And I hope your journey is full of joy and laughter and understanding and all things that just bring fun and interest and awe and wonder to you. Anyways, I hope you have a great week. We'll talk again next podcast episode. Bye.